Good evening, everyone. My name is Boladale Katunga, and the topic of my capstone presentation is effect of the pandemic on retail food, dietary patterns, and household spending. And I got a table of contents like every other person: introduction, problem motivation, problem statement, literature review, data model analysis, research recommendations, conclusion, and references. And the COVID-19 pandemic caught the world unaware, and the impact led to widespread death, illness, and destruction of normal operations. Different elements of everyday life were affected, with the impact being directly felt in retail food industry, household eating patterns, and consumer spending. And these complex links and the passion brought the needs for this to carry out this study. Pandemic affected logistics. The movement of goods were curtailed. There was changes in retail food industry. Food distribution was limited. And this shift disrupted supply chains, limited access to food products, changed lifestyles, and financial constraints. Restrictions caused by lockdown prevented people from going to work. And this really affected their incomes and their spending patterns. So pandemic triggered a direct impact on purchasing behavior, changes in food choices and feeding habits. And this study adopted qualitative methodology to understand the pandemic experiences of the participants. Data retrieved from government agency and including a US Bureau of Labor Statistics, among others. And semi-structured interviews were conducted. We advanced to grocery shoppers, grocery managers, and their employees. And the study approach incorporated the primary and secondary sources in assessing information. Interview was conducted face-to-face, and the questions were open-ended. And this is to allow the participant to share in their own words the in-depth of their experiences during the pandemic. And this interview was conducted in 4 outlets with the approval of the store managers. And I was given a very short time, but these are some of the questions presented to the participants and their responses. And based on the data collected related with the research study shows that there was a change in individual budget as people spend more on food at the initial stage of pandemic. So due to stock pile up, bulk purchases, and kind of general increments of price at that time, at the first quarter of the pandemic, there was sharp increments in spending. Around February, March, and April, there was increments. But as the pandemic progresses to the second quarter, around June, July, and August, there was kind of reduction in spending. And this spending moved towards foodstuff, grocery, and beverages. So the second slide shows the comparison between March and April 2019 and March and April 2020. And we can see that there are kind of sharp demand and increase in purchase of meat, egg, fruit, vegetable, alcoholic beverages at the first quarter of the pandemic. As I earlier mentioned, as the pandemic progresses, there was 9.8% reduction in consumer spending in the second quarters. So and by the second quarter of 2021, consumer and business began to adapt to the pandemic after 1 year of economic meltdown. So there was kind of normalcy as businesses and consumers began to adapt to the pandemic. And also data shows that there was kind of increment in online services provided by physical store during the pandemic. There was kind of increase in online services reduced labor force, increased price fluctuation due to imbalance in demand and supply give rises to a delivery option. Many people were in the house, they cannot go out. So many people resorted in shopping online. And some people also, we call the stores, requested for home delivery. So this really forced the retailers to re-examine their business model and consider e-commerce as their customers began to prefer home delivery and online shopping. And also, dietary pattern was affected as well. There was kind of significant changes in eating habit and food consumption due to closure of restaurants. Many people cannot go out during the lockdown, so they resorted in cooking in the house. So there was kind of increase in home cooking and baking during the pandemic. And the results of this study identified that there was sharp increase in demand of essential food items. There was decreased supply due to logistic disruption, increase in consumer spending. There was shift towards online shopping and e-commerce. There was change in eating habits as well. And for future preparedness, collaboration between stakeholders, consumer organizations, farmers, suppliers, retail food businesses and governments is essential. And why? To develop dynamic supply chains and advance local sourcing, advocating for policy, focusing on food security and nutritional quality to facilitate resilience, alliances in data analysis and decision making, which I believe is very important. And in conclusion, COVID-19 pandemic significantly changed operation within retail food industry. It reshaped consumer preferences and behavior. It brought accelerated development and adoption of e-commerce. The idea of online home cooking during COVID-19 impacted well-being and health of individuals. There was modification of household spending during pandemic to ensure essential items are prioritized. Stay-at-home order created opportunity for intimacy and bonding within the family. And I acknowledge Jesus Christ that helped me throughout the study. I also special thanks to Professor Dominic Harkins, my project advisor. She's so helpful. Thank you so much for your support, Professor Dominic. I also want to thank all my professors that have imparted me, lectured me throughout my study. I appreciate you all. Professor Scala, I really appreciate you, Ma. I appreciate Professor Han, Professor Cindy, Professor Stella, Professor Yao. I appreciate you, sir. Professor Alice, I thank you. Professor Lee, I appreciate you. And all my course-mates that I had the opportunity to study with, I appreciate all of you. Thank you so much. And the next slide is references. Thank you. Hello. Okay.
I was just going to say questions for Bola. Yeah, I have one. I was kind of interested in, supply chain risk was a course we used to have before the pandemic, and it's kind of funny that we don't offer it currently, because the big pandemic happened. But can you go back to one of the last couple of slides you had too? When you brought in, let me see. I think it was like slide 15 or 16, please.
16, okay.
Yeah.
16.
Oh, I'm sorry, 15 then, your conclusion.
15.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So some of this stuff, or I'm sorry, 14, please, with your recommendation.
14, okay.
Yeah, so you have the last note there, which is pretty interesting, to develop dynamic supply chains and advance local sourcing and things like that. Did you have time this summer to think about like some of the risks associated with that, or how local sourcing could be like impacted or advanced or things like that?
Yeah, local sourcing is very important because this COVID-19 came unexpectedly and it really affected supply chains. So in my own advice as well, we advise for future, that's more agriculture, home sourcing, instead of buy everything across the country, that more agricultural products should be, we should have more agricultural products. Farming should increase in America so that at least there will be no kind of shortage of food, right? So more production in the country. So that is my kind of advice, also my recommendation.
Okay.
Yeah.
And in your interviews, like what were some of the also main takeaways you found, or something that maybe surprised you that's a better way to ask it, something that surprised you that maybe you weren't expecting in some of your interviews?
In the interview?
Right. I thought you did some interviews, right? Yeah.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah, that's like a little hard to read, right? I mean, just because.
Yes. I tried to.
So I was just kind of curious on something that maybe surprised you or something that you didn't necessarily expect.
So when I was asking my question, interview them, right? Is that what you mean?
Yeah, like, or a response that maybe you weren't expecting to hear or something like that.
Yeah. So one of the response was like, one of the employees said, even the people were so scared of them that when they buy things in the store, they don't want anybody to touch it. They prefer to scan what they bought themselves.
Okay.
So, so they prefer to do their kind of checking to scan their items. They don't want anybody, because of the distance, right? Everybody will avoid people. So to the extent they don't want, that people don't want anybody to touch their things. So it was kind of funny when they were telling me.
Well, I think there was at one point where they were telling everybody to, like, wash your packages and wash your groceries and stuff. And then we realized COVID really wasn't a touched, illness. It was more of a respiratory illness.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Any other questions for Bola? All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you, ma'am.